it was amazing to see that stuff work out. It was such a blessing to see how people all pulled together, and then to see that on the other side in Turkey, to see how that blessed so many people. It was such an encouragement, such an encouraging trip. It was really wonderful. I just want to thank everyone for all the help that it was. I could not thank anybody enough. So with Turkey, as I'm not sure if everyone knows, but Turkey is not actually located up the Taylor Highway. Turkey is right over there. So you kind of find it over there around the outside, kind of outside of the Middle East, but close to the Middle East, up north of Africa. I think it took me 32, 34 hours to get there traveling. Of course, y'all know you got to drive to Fairbanks and all that stuff's included. But it was actually an amazingly smooth trip. They don't always go that smooth. I couldn't believe how things were getting blessed along that trip. It was such, again, just seeing God work stuff out. So when I first get there, I get the flight, and I actually had a seat beside me on the airplane going to Seattle. And I was like, this is amazing. And then I get on the international flight from Seattle going to Istanbul, and I had an open seat beside me on an international flight. I have not had that since COVID. So that was absolutely amazing. Also, too, because of all the donations, all the things that people sent, I had 5 luggage bags that I was bringing with me. I was like a spectacle going through the airport. And they waived all the fees for those bags. Couldn't believe it. I came with a little paper from the IMR. I know, right? It really was. So I came up there and I asked about it. I was like, is there any way I'm bringing this to Turkey? I'm doing this stuff. And the lady literally rolled her eyes at me. And I'm like, well, there goes that. But then she waived all the fees. I could not believe it. It was so amazing. It was really, really great. Like, it was awesome. And, again, go all the way to Istanbul. I missed my flight because the flight left late, and I'm like, oh no, am I going to make the bus tomorrow morning to get into where I need to go to? But I was on another flight an hour later. I still got a good night's sleep before we had to take the bus into Istanbul. Sorry, from Adana into the Hatay region. Again, it could not have possibly gone better. It was amazing, amazing travel experience. But so we traveled into Istanbul, flew into Adana, and from Adana it took about a 6-hour bus ride down to the Hatay region. And there, all the bags came through. People were having luggage issues. People's bags wasn't coming through. Even though I missed my flight, it was on a separate flight, every one of those 5 luggages showed up just right there. It was absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. So in Turkey, just as I think pretty much everybody knows, the reason I was in Turkey was because of the earthquake disaster. They got hit by astronomical, devastating earthquakes, 2 of them. And then 2 weeks later, they got hit by another one. And the area that it compromised is such a huge, large, vast area. You don't quite get it until you get into that area. And you just start traveling for mile after mile after mile. And you're just seeing rubbish and just demolition all over the place. It was a devastating blow. So our numbers are reporting over 50,000 deceased from that earthquake. The numbers in Turkey are upwards of 200,000 because we're reporting documented cases. So the ones we identified, these people, this is it. Turkey are reporting the missing people, over 200,000 people lost. It was in an area that had over 8.2 million people though. So you have this happen in an area that had 8.2 million people, then all of a sudden they lose, I think it was 85% of all infrastructure. They lose water, they lose electricity, they lose all sewage capabilities, they lose everything in an area of 8.2 million people. It was a complete logistical nightmare. Now these pictures, I'm going to go through several of these pictures, they're it's a little deceiving. So we look at this, we think, well, that building's destroyed, but all these are good. But they're actually not. So none of these buildings are actually capable of having people in them. They were not safe. They're going to come down. So these buildings are not safe to be in. So even though we're going to go through these and we see a lot of buildings that look inhabitable, they're not inhabitable. And when you're walking down the streets, you see, like, there's no way I'd walk inside that building. But the pictures are a little bit deceiving because it looks like there's still a lot of functional buildings. But in reality, it would be a lot better if they all came down. Because now they're having to try to remove all this stuff and try to find housing for people in the middle of all these buildings that are going to come down. And so it's a massive safety issue right now trying to deal with all these standing buildings that are going to come down. We would actually walk down the streets and so a lot of these, there's 2, it's huge cities, giant cities, the buildings will come up and then go out over the street part way and then go back up, kind of like a split level home. But you think about this in a 5-story apartment complex. And so even the streets aren't safe because these buildings are going to come down, and they're going to come down in the streets. So it's kind of a nightmare of a situation. This right here, again, that building beside of it was completely just kind of knocked over to its side. This building right here was almost completely removed. But this is kind of what the area looks like all around where they're at. So you see, I don't know if you can quite see from this distance, but there's rebar just everywhere because their infrastructure is largely based on rebar and concrete. That's how their structures are built, rebar and concrete. And so I couldn't believe actually how many buildings they had removed. But you can see, so all throughout this giant city, there's just rebar and broken glass sticking absolutely everywhere. And this is now the children's playgrounds. And so it's a dangerous little place to run around. But there's just rebar and glass absolutely everywhere. This building right here, you can actually see as it came down, it twisted and spun around. Just all over the streets. This right here was actually leftover part of, so the doctor, when the IMR team that I went with first got there, they got to the last, they kind of showed up first at the last remaining hospital in the area, and the whole upstairs, all the floors upstairs were no longer usable because so much stuff was damaged. They could only use the bottom floor of the last hospital in the area. And they said they got there and there was one doctor. The only person there working was one doctor, and just thousands and thousands of people needing immediate medical care because of all the devastation that was happening. They show up and he's just there by himself trying to take care of just thousands and thousands of people needing help. And that was his house. If I got the picture located, that was his house. So his whole house got collapsed. His family, thankfully, they all made it out. And they were actually living in the tent city that we were operating out of. So the doctor was living in the tent. It came down to be living in a tent. It was kind of the great equalizer. Everybody just kind of came to the same field, and it was a really humbling place to see. Really humbling to see all this. Again, just kind of more, this is what they're facing right now. Everywhere is just stuff like this. And again, all these buildings in the background that look good from these pictures, they're not. They're actually extremely dangerous to even be in the street beside of them. Alright, so the team that I went with, this is our team right there. They actually had 4 doctors on this team. It's like the largest doctor team we had. And so they had us there helping them as well. We were operating out of that tent that was behind us all there. That was kind of our main clinic tent. We also had while we were there, we got there and it was literally just boxes and piles of medication that they had been trying to go through and use. And I don't know how anyone was functioning out of it. So we kind of determined it to be our goal that we were going to try to set it up to be a functional pharmacy system out of there, and we could actually utilize and help people better with the medications we had. And we ended up devoting hours upon hours into setting up a pharmacy. So in the back of that tent, by the time we left, we actually had shelving with medications all organized into different antibiotic groups and different things and stuff. And so it was really a blessing to be able to help that up to people. What we did, there's unloading some of those luggages I brought with me right there. And so I got to apologize. I don't have as many pictures of stuff that I'd like to have because it's not appropriate to take pictures of patients while they're getting cared for. And you don't want to turn people into projects and stuff. So I'm really careful. I don't have as many pictures I'd love to show you. I'd love to show you a lot more. But I try to really be respectful to people there. And I don't ever want to turn them into projects. I want them to be someone I love instead of a project. So I didn't take that many pictures. But what we were doing over there, so we operated a clinic. We were in a tent city. And all the other tent cities in the area was utilizing this clinic as their primary health care facility. We saw on average about 150 patients a day, and we were treating everything from, well, the number one thing we saw was infections. So now you got all these people are crammed inside of tight living spaces. They have tons of people living inside of tents, kind of having temperature changes and stuff from cold to hot a lot. They're all spreading around disease. We have a lot of respiratory illnesses, a lot of respiratory infections, a lot of skin infections. We treated a lot of lice and a lot of scabies. Scabies is kind of like sort of like full body lice, but it's kind of like it's a parasite, and it's really contagious, but they're all cramped inside these tight living conditions. They don't have the running water they're used to. So it was kind of a grounds, a lot of that kind of stuff. We saw a lot of lacerations, so the kids are all playing in these areas with all this rebar and broken glass. So we had still having lots of kids needing stitches and wound care getting taken care of. There's still all the demolition crew is trying to remove all this rubble. So a lot of them are getting injured. We had one guy that had his massive, just like removed this side of his head, and treating his wounds and stuff like that. Just a lot of kind of across the board stuff that we were seeing, but really fast paced, kind of working through the day, just constantly going. I got to share a story too. My favorite patient that we had, it was such a, too, I love helping people. I love sharing the love of Christ with people, and a lot of times you just have to show that to people and just show them love. And my favorite, absolute favorite experience there was, so in the area, it's in Turkey. Obviously there's a lot of Turkish people there, but we were right beside the Syrian border. There was a lot of Syrian refugees in the area, and it was kind of an area located that it was a very popular refugee location. So there's a lot of impoverished refugees there as well. Refugees from other places also. So we had this one family come in. They didn't speak Turkish, they didn't speak Arabic, and they didn't speak English. So no one there could communicate with them. I was very likely possibly the very first white guy this little girl had ever seen. She was we're guessing 4 to 5, don't really know how old she was, but guess around 4 to 5, and she was absolutely terrified of me. And so I'm trying to triage her, kind of get her into the clinic, and I mean, she's snot bubbling, fighting, trying to clown the mom kind of thing. Absolutely terrified of me. And the little brother is kind of, he's her older brother, but he was guessing maybe 8. He don't want nothing to do with me and stuff. Mom was kind of, she wants them to get taken care of because they were sick and stuff. And just the favorite part of my whole trip, she is trying to climb a ladder and escape. And I was able to kind of just, hey, it's okay. And I kind of pulled out a balloon. I tie animal balloons. And so I just kind of slowly started pumping up this animal balloon. And about the time I tie it off, she kind of starts getting a little intrigued. You know, she's curious what I'm doing. And I start slowly kind of tying this animal balloon. And she stops and she sits, and the next thing you know, she's sitting down and she's watching every move I make. And I slowly tie this little animal balloon turtle, and I turn it into a bracelet. And I draw all the little turtle features on it, and I put it on her bracelet, on her little wrist. And she went from just spitting snot and spit and climbing on Mom, and she looked up at me and just had the most beautiful, dark little brown eyes. And she looked up at me and just smiled. And then she let us do everything we needed. She let us take all of her vitals, just assess her. Dr. Bill would do everything with her. And it was an amazing moment to take what someone sees as fear, and what a lot of the, in a Muslim nation, a lot of people will see, they're told that Westerners are Christians, and they're told that Westerners Christians are bad. And so that was one more little child that I was able to take and say, no, Christ is love. Christ is wonderful. Christ cares about you. And as simple as just tying that little girl bracelet, I took from her being terrified of us to her just completely trusting us. And it's amazing to see how God will work with just tiny little things. Absolutely love that little experience, though. It really, really warmed me up. So the tent city that we were operating in, this was it. Now, when I got there, I was expecting to see a giant tent city, kind of like what you think of the refugee camps in Kenya, you know, with just thousands of tents all set up. Because right now they're trying to house about 1.6 million people, and they still don't have tents. They still don't have enough tents for people. So I was expecting to see huge areas of tents. But when I got there, I realized that this isn't possible, because these are huge city areas, big city locations. There's no ground space to put large areas at. And then 2, you have to be far enough away from all these standing buildings that are going to come down. You have to be far enough away from there. So what they have is many different small tent cities. So the tent city that we were in had about 300 people in it, I think they said 60 tents, counting like the cook tents and the tents we were staying in and things like that. And so they're putting families of 5 or so in each tent, kind of about how they're handling it. 5 people or so can sleep in there okay. And so they had a bunch of small tent cities. But they all are using the same. So like this was the cook tents. These tents with the big tall points. There was some organization in trying to feed people. They're giving them 2 meals a day. And people from all other tent cities are coming to get the food. And people from all these other tent cities are coming to ours with the clinic. But that's just how they have to scatter people all across. So the area that we were in, you could tell, used to be a city park. It probably used to be a little city park because there was still a little kids' playground there. So you could tell they went through and just, in order to put tents there, they came through the dozer and just kind of leveled everything out and then turned it into a tent city. So there's just logistically, they've just got small groups of tent cities all over this area. And you'll see individual tents and things all over the place. So it's really spread out. Again, this is just how everything was kind of set up. It's kind of a housing development with tents now. Now that dog right there, we had a little bit of a relationship with this dog. We started off, we thought she was so cool, because they have all these stray dogs running everywhere, all these street dogs. And we thought, oh, look how sweet this dog is. She just loved us. She went with us everywhere, constantly wanted to be with us. She carried around that little plastic bucket. That was her toy. Well, that tent right there was where we slept. And she laid there all night long, and she would bark at every other single stray dog that came within a mile of our tent, I believe, all night long. And if you can imagine a dog outside your house barking, how annoying that can be, imagine a dog sleeping up against your tent barking all night can be. So Frida was no longer as sweet as she used to be. And here's just kind of a look down. It was so sad. So these people